Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. When I was around 22 years old, I had a scary encounter while staying at a hotel for a job. Around 2010, I was working for a traveling photography group that took church directory photos. Each photographer drove separately from all over the place, so I was in Harlan at that time. I was staying at a hotel along with other photographers who joined with me. I believe there was 4 of us, 2 guys, a girl, and myself. One morning, I went down to breakfast and I was watching the TV in the hotel breakfast area. Someone was also down there nearby, and it was a guy. When he looked at me and I said, "Good morning," as I do wherever I go, just to be friendly, he said it back and we had just a polite exchange. Something you would do with a stranger that you never thought you would see again. He mentioned that he was staying there with his team for a construction job, and I go to leave and I say something very casual like, "Have a good one, see you later." He said something like we could hang later. I didn't really think anything of it, and I just brushed it off like, yeah, maybe. I don't remember if it was the same day or not, but as I didn't work until 11 a.m., we tend to work from like 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., give or take depending on the size of the church and etc. I decided to go take a nap since I didn't sleep well the night before. While laying in my room, I kept receiving phone calls to my room phone. I wasn't used to getting calls like that ever, so I just picked up. I would say hello, but nobody would answer. After a few times, I eventually just took the receiver off and placed it beside the phone so that it would stop ringing. When it was time to get up and leave, I left my room and I saw the guy was there in the hall. I waved casually, still not thinking anything of it. He asked where I was going and I said that I had to go to work. My friend showed up and I went with her to the car as I was going to ride with her to the church. I told her about getting strange phone calls and she mentioned that she did as well. Later that night, there was a thunderstorm. My photographer group and I stood by the hotel lobby door watching the lightning. It was thundering and extremely dark. There were chances for tornadoes, so we were keeping tabs with each other. Eventually, I just go to my room for the night and then I hear a knock on my door. I didn't really want to answer it. However, I did, cracking the door to see who it was. And it was the guy. He talked about how I said we could hang out, and I told him that I was too tired after working all day and I needed to sleep, and then I just shut the door. Now, I can't remember if this was the next morning or still night, but I recall him knocking again, but I wouldn't answer. I pretended to either be out or sleeping. I called my mom and I started talking to her. I told her what was happening, and although I was scared, I almost acted like I wasn't when I was speaking with her. But suddenly, I had a weird feeling. I whispered to my mom, "Mom, hold on a second, I need to check something." I tiptoe as quietly over to my room door as possible, and I look out the peephole, and I see him. I then see him turn his head to my door as if he was listening for something. My heart started to race, and I then saw him move to the side. You know how the wall sometimes goes in for the doors, so there is like an indentation in the hallway for each room. Well, he goes to the wall away from the room that's just out. I think he thought he was hiding because he would try to lean his head around the corner of the jut-out portion as if he was listening for something. I walked to the furthest side of my room quietly and whispered to my mom about how I am scared. I called the front desk to complain like my mom suggested, and I can't remember if I also texted my friend or I called her, but she also complained to the front desk about the various phone calls that she received. Eventually, we were given new rooms, and the construction group manager was told by the hotel about one of his guys, and that creepy guy was told to stay away from us. I even told some of the church people about the situation, and they all said that if we needed to stay with them, we could. All very nice, but still all strangers to me, and I didn't trust anyone at that point. I'm not sure what happened to him, as I didn't see him after that. I was a little jealous of my friend because she ended up with a hot tub in her room, and I didn't, but it was fine. However, after that, I was more aware and careful with who I talked to and what I said. So when I was 19, in my second year of university, I lived in a semi-small city, if you can even call it that really. Now, due to some other stuff that was ongoing at that time that I won't get into, I often went on walks by myself for my own well-being. I know a lone person should never walk by themselves at night, but again, it was a small city. So whilst I was on this walk, a male approached me. At first, he was just trying his luck, so to speak, asking for my phone number. But that is when he started becoming more and more aggressive, trying to force me to give him information, like where I lived, what times I walk alone, and how easily he could just follow me. At this point, I became really quite scared and essentially told him to go away and leave me alone. But this is when he tried to grab my phone and said, "You're coming with me." He then proceeded to grab both of my wrists and drag me away. I have never felt such panic, as he must have been a 6-foot-plus man of a large stature, so I was no match for his strength, being a 19-year-old girl who couldn't afford any type of nutritious meal. Anyway, by the grace of something, there was a pub nearby where people saw this happen and then came over to intervene. Thankfully, I got away. I took the long way home in order to prevent him from following me. So, I wish that I could say that that's where it ended. I didn't think that he had followed me or watched me, but he quite clearly had. In the weeks that followed, we had a black car parked outside our address at about 12 a.m. at night. The figure in the car was very concealed. Anyway, this person remained watching outside for hours. He would come out of the car occasionally and can only do what I would describe as lurking around our address. And no, we didn't call the police at this time. That was stupid. When I was not in, and thankfully none of my housemates were, our neighbors had to call the police as there was a man trying to enter our home, looking for any openings in the windows and trying our back and front door handles. Alarmingly, the said man was trying to enter my bedroom as I was on the ground floor. Anyway, one night we were all sat in the kitchen drinking cheap booze, as university students do, when the exact man that had approached me on the street those weeks ago jumped our back wall, which was very tall may I add, and then he ran into our garden and just stared through the window. This man had a look in his eye that I had never seen before, just pure evil. He wasn't even alarmed that he had been seen, nor was he even spooked. So, we called the police again and he finally got caught and arrested after trying to run off from them. Also, credit to the police here, they were there in literally 3 minutes, which may have helped that we live so close to a police station. Anyway, what happened sends chills down my spine to this day. This man had a knife on his person. What were his plans? What was he going to do? I will never know, and I am glad to never know. If there is a lesson here to anyone, do not walk the streets at night. And if you do, be with someone, even if you only live in a small area. These types of people are in every corner of our world. And that being said, let's never meet again. I, 7 female at that time, and my best friend, 8 female at that time, who I will refer to as A, used to have a day in the week, Wednesdays, when I went to A's house after school for about 4 hours. I would have dinner there, and then I would go home. A's mom, Australian, didn't have a job at that time, so when we walked to her house, she would be there when we arrived. But on this specific day, however, she was out. I can't remember why, because this was many years ago. There was this man. He used to watch the young girls at pickup time. He would just stand there, alone, with his creepy hoodie pulled over his head. My school had kids of all genders from ages 5 to 12, but he only ever watched the girls under 10. He was young too, maybe only 20. I never paid any attention to him. Maybe he's an older brother, and I just look a bit like his sister. On Wednesday, A and I got out of our class, and she reminded me that I forgot my drink bottle on my desk in the classroom. I went to go back in and get it. The huge swarm of kids had dwindled slightly by the time that I got back, but there was still a lot of kids, obviously. My school only had about 400 kids, but it felt like a lot. Not really relevant, sorry. There were less kids around, and the ones who got picked up by a car were mostly gone, and the ones that rode their bikes were long gone too. It was mostly just the kids who walked. A's house wasn't far. It took less than 10 minutes to get there, usually. But we used to get distracted by some of our other friends who we passed when we walked there. And for context, these friends were all our age and were all boys. A and I started walking home, and it was completely normal. Nothing seemed off. We crossed the first road and then started laughing as I jumped up on someone's brick wall and I started walking along it. Or I was, until the person who lived in the house started banging on their window. So I jumped down, embarrassed. A sort of waved her hand at me, beckoning me to be faster, so I jogged a bit, with my huge clunky backpack weighing me down, and I caught up to her. We crossed a very large road about 6 or 7 minutes after this, and it wasn't long until we were at A's house. We just turned a corner, walk a bit further, and then it was right there. We turned the corner, and we started walking the short distance. I turned around when I heard a car just to make sure that I wasn't walking too close to the road. And that's when I saw him, walking about 20 meters behind us, hood pulled over his head. Well, that's not too weird. He probably just also had to go this way, right? When I looked at him, he stopped walking, and he just stood in the middle of the footpath. I told A that I was a bit freaked out, and we started walking faster. We got to her house and thought that it was a little funny. He was still standing back where he'd stopped earlier, but he must have seen what house we went into. A's family made us take off our shoes and socks and leave them on the front porch. We did that, opened the door, and then went inside. Usually, we only shut the flywire, seeing as A's mom was there, but today we closed and locked the second door too, and I am so glad that we did. We decided to go play video games in the front room. The blind was down, and we were sitting on the couch. It must have been 15 or so minutes when there was a tiny knock on the door. We're smart kids. We knew not to open the door. A's mom would just unlock it and come inside if it was her. A decided to peek out the blinds though, and she said that it was some random guy. She thought that it might have been a salesman. I didn't bother looking. The knocking gradually got louder until he was pounding on the door like he wanted to break it down, and the door handle kept jiggling. We were insanely scared, and then we hid between the wall and the back of the couch. He then left after a little while. It wasn't too long. He got bored quickly, maybe 5 or 10 minutes of knocking. When A's mom got home, we didn't tell her. We didn't realize how serious it was. When it was time for me to go home and my mom had arrived, I went to put my shoes back on. But both mine and A's socks were gone, taken out of our shoes where we had tucked them. I never saw him again, or at least not following us. He might have still lurked around the school. I just don't remember. This was during my tenure in Japan, during my first teaching job. I was still learning the language, and I could only understand or speak a little bit. I also had an international driver's license at that time, having failed the local driving test multiple times before passing. I had used a whole month's paycheck to buy a small K car, I think a small box car, a Spiano Mazda to be precise. Every other day, I drove to this particular preschool where I taught the 3-year-old classes English. It was usually a very boring, uneventful drive and lasted 30 minutes. But this time, left me with PTSD. I was running a bit late, so I was driving a bit faster than I was supposed to be going. I didn't want my strict boss to yell at me. I was in the right lane, which was the fast lane. I rarely drove in that lane because I just enjoyed the scenery, but I didn't have time for that today. I noticed that my lane was disappearing, and I saw that there was a space in front of the car next to me, the psycho's car. So, I put my foot down, going even faster than I was supposed to, and I get in front of the car. I was a whole 2 car lengths in front of him, and except for the speeding aspect, I followed the rules of the road. That move to get in front of him apparently upset him so much that he followed my car for 20 minutes to my workplace. I didn't notice as I was trying to quietly urge people to go faster. As I pulled up, I noticed that my usual space was filled. I was rather upset at that time, but I would have been in a worse situation if I was in my usual position. The parking lot was actually just an abandoned gas station outside of the school. I parked my car and then get myself situated to get out, grabbing my purse, my phone, and mentally preparing myself for the next 3 hours. What I continued to not notice though is the man's car following me into the parking lot and then parking behind me. In all honesty, I am not proud of any of my decisions in the next 30 minutes of my life. He appears at my window, and as all the kids and their parents are arriving, I just presumed that he was a parent. I rolled down my window to see what he wanted, and I, a 24 female at that time, was just trying to be a professional teacher to this random father of my student. Unfortunately, he wasn't a father, but a deranged lunatic. He randomly started screaming at me in a language that I didn't understand in front of 2 to 4-year-olds and their parents. I only understood that he was angry about my car and that he was calling the police. I understood the word police. I obviously should have pretended not to have understood that word because now he was screaming at me about me being a liar and that I understood Japanese. Again, out of the words I learned from watching anime at that time, I learned police, Japanese, liar, and angry. So, That's literally all I understood from this very unhinged man, still screaming at me in a parking lot where toddlers were literally staring at him. He demanded that I followed him across the street and I agreed. For quite a few reasons. 1. I wanted to get him away from the kids ASAP. 2. The parking lot I was in was not going to give a quick getaway. The one across the street was an Aeon, so basically a big supermarket, aka an easier way to flee. And 3. I wanted the psycho to get back in his car. And 4. That's apparently where he sent the police to arrest me for trying to kill him, according to what I was told later. I drove to the Aeon and I kept my car running. He parked 2 rows ahead of me, glaring at me. For the next few minutes, I awkwardly just sit there. The police come, and he goes up to them demanding that they see the video. One goes to watch while the other comes to my car to get my version of the story and then verify my license. After getting the all clear, he asked what started the situation using Google Translate. I replied that I didn't know and that the other driver just randomly started yelling at me at my place of work. The officer walked away and spoke with his partner at the psycho's car. They talked with him, promising to deal with me. One officer asked if the psycho had assaulted me. Honestly, that possibility hadn't even occurred to me before that moment, that this very unhinged person could have started an altercation. I replied that no, he didn't, and I just wanted him to go away. Sorry, there was no way that I could have afforded a legal route on a teacher's salary. They walked back over to the psycho again and promised to get rid of him. I texted my boss the situation because now I was officially missing a class. The psycho then drives away, and then they come and stood protectively next to my car. After waiting 10 minutes, they said that I was free to go. There was no ticket, no fuss, no arrest on my part or the psycho's part. What the hell? Why did I have to deal with this situation for it to be just over so easily? I was still freaking out and I was not looking forward to the 30-minute drive home where the psycho was headed. I realized on my way home that I noticed when cars were behind me for a while. I also noticed that I was freaking out because they were heading in the same direction as me on the road with only a single lane per side for 5 minutes. Thanks to the psycho, I now freak out when someone literally drives back into town behind me. I couldn't shift the feeling of freaking out when someone drove behind me the whole time that I was living in Japan. I was able to increase the amount of time someone could drive behind me before freaking out though. Eventually, I would make a random turn somewhere, pull over, and just calm myself down. I still am wary when people follow behind me for longer than 10 minutes. But now I can differentiate between them just trying to get to work versus becoming round 2 of my nightmare. So, psycho guy with your deranged train of thoughts, please just stay in Japan and let's never meet again. There is this classmate, 22 and male, that I, 22 and female, have known for 2 years. We worked together in a few classes and studied in groups with others. We also follow each other on social media, but we never hung out one-on-one. A few days before graduation, he asked if I could help him with a class project. We met up at the library, and during our conversation, I casually mentioned that I had Tinder. He seemed surprised and asked if I actually met people from there. I said yes, and he kept emphasizing how surprised he was. After we left the library, he offered me a ride back to my dorm. I declined, and I said that I lived at the name of my dorm, which wasn't far away, and I just walked home. Shortly after I had reached home, I saw 2 missed calls from him. When I called back, he said that he had driven to my dorm's parking lot to hang out. Mind you, this person and me had never hung out outside of studying together, and I had never invited him to my dorm before, but he just decided to show up randomly unannounced. Still, I had known him for a couple of years, and I didn't want to cause any drama or deal with any gossip from people in our major, so I let him come up to my dorm. He sat in my chair at first, but then he moved to sit next to me on my bed where I was laying. He slowly started making physical contact, and eventually, some physical stuff happened. Afterwards, I asked him how many girls he's done this to, and he said 4 female friends, and he expressed his disappointment that usually afterwards they brushed him off when he tried texting them afterwards. He told me a few times that we were still friends and that I can still text him after we graduate. The whole thing left me feeling uneasy. I didn't give him any signals that I wanted to hook up, nor did he ask me if I wanted to prior to showing up. He just showed up uninvited after I mentioned having Tinder. I wasn't forced into anything, and I doubt I'll ever see him again. But I still find it creepy and overstepping of boundaries that a classmate that I have known for years would follow me home just because I said that I had Tinder. This happened like 6 to 7 years ago when I was working as a supervisor at an off license in a pretty small farming village in the middle of nowhere. It's a little past 10 p.m. our closing time, and my coworker B have finished up all of our jobs, packed everything that needed packing away. The alarm is set, and we're outside, and my key is in the motor to bring the shutter down. When all of a sudden, we both jump at the sound of a loud car engine revving to life. And not a second later, as the shutter meets the pavement, the offending car comes barreling around the corner and then pulls up abruptly about 15 feet away, conveniently pulling up in the blind spot of the store's prehistoric CCTV cameras. Now, I'm dense about cars, so I couldn't tell you what make or model it is, but it's nice. Maybe a Jeep or a Land Rover. That kind isn't uncommon in the area. As I said, we're a farm village, but normally you can tell when they belong to a farmer because they're caked up in mud and dust. But this thing was new car level of shiny, pitch black with matching tinted windows. This is speculation because, as mentioned, I don't know anything about cars, but I'm sure the windows were tinted past legal levels because we couldn't see inside at all. The driver just sits there, engine still on, seemingly not going anywhere. As B and I chat between ourselves, both unconsciously stalling, waiting for whoever this is to move along. But we seem to be in a stalemate because nobody moves for at least 5 minutes. B's older than me. I went to school with her kids, and I can tell mom mode is activated by the way that she's eyeing the car and how she offers to drive me home. She's parked further up the road, so we wouldn't have to pass the stranger's car to get to it. I live with my parents at the other end of the road, about a 2 to 3 minute walk, but I would have to pass the stranger to get there. Even though my nerves are on edge, I'm not ready to assume the worst, and I don't want to put her out as she lives in a different direction, so I just decline. Yeah, I know. I die first in a horror movie. I'm content to just cross to the pavement on the other side to put a little distance between us, and then I could leg it if I needed to. But just as I approach the edge of the pavement to start crossing, some guy jumps out from the back seat on the side facing where I was about to cross to, leaving the door open. He's not masked or wearing dark clothes or anything to that effect. but he's wearing a cap and keeping his head down, so I can't really make out his facial features. And from what I can see, he's white, easily 6 foot, and I wouldn't say big, but fit enough that they could take B or myself, who are both closer to 5 foot and certainly not in the best shape of our respective lives. Immediately, I start backing up even more unnerved, as if sensing my suspicion. He lights up a cigarette, acting nonchalant, but at the same time, starts rounding the back of the car, joining B and I back on our side of the road, but for maybe 10 feet of distance. Actually, if the offer still stands, I would love a lift home, I say to B, and I can tell that she's relieved by my change of heart. We speedwalk to her car, neither of us taking our eyes off the other vehicle and its passenger for more than a second. And as soon as we are seated in her dinky little 2-door, I pull out my phone, planning on taking a photo of their license plate. B has a similar thought and she's rummaging in her glove box for a notepad. But before either of us manage to execute our plans, the guy who had gotten out climbs back into the back seat and the car speeds off into the night, leaving a half-smoked cigarette in its wake. Typing this up actually makes the whole thing feel even more trivial than it did in my head. But in the moment, it all felt very distressing. The theory that wins out on most retellings is that they were there to rob the shop. B and I would have been easy to overpower, and presumably, there was at least one other person in the car to aid in that. They could have just taken the keys from me, or they could have forced us to go in with them so I could turn off the alarm system and open the safes. A few months later, I had moved to and was working a different job in the city, but I heard through the grapevine that the shop had been held up at knife point. I have no idea if it was the same people, but timeline-wise, it seems possible. The scariest theory goes to my mother though, who watches a lot of true crime and is certain that she could have been a police detective if not for a criminal record. She's convinced that it was a planned kidnapping, specifically for me. Her evidence being, first, the lack of proper face coverings and the fact that they were parked in the camera's blind spots. There were more cameras in the building that they couldn't have avoided if they wanted to go in and rob the place. Next, the fact that they seemed to have waited for us to fully leave the building. If they wanted to rob us, it would have been easier to ambush us as we unlocked the door to leave, rather than having us reopen everything. Third, the car's back door being left open would have made it easier for them to force me inside as I walked by it. And lastly, I always take the same short route to and from work for convenience. But why someone would have wanted to kidnap me specifically is a mystery, but I can see the logic in her arguments, I guess. I was already working on my notice period, but she made my stepdad drive me to and from work for all my remaining open and closing shifts. The theory that helps me sleep at night, though, is that it was all a coincidence. I can't explain away all of the little things that seem like red flags at that time, but I can 100% believe that the owner of a seemingly very nice car didn't want his mate smoking in it. So, he pulled up, argued with the guy for a few minutes about the situation, and eventually convinced him to get out to smoke his half of a cigarette. Maybe they'd legitimately wanted to come in and buy something, and were talking out the alternative options after pulling up and realizing that we were closed. Whatever the motive or intention, B and I were thoroughly spooked. And I still think about what might have happened if I'd walked home instead of taking B up on her offer. This started about 6 months ago. I was getting ready for bed in my room. It was maybe 10:30 p.m., My curtains were closed, so I couldn't see out the window. But I heard 3 hard knocks on the glass of my window. Of course, that scared the living shit out of me, so I didn't even look and I ran and got my dad and I made him look. Now, I live with my parents and 2 brothers in a fairly busy neighborhood, so noises weren't uncommon to hear. But this knock was directly on my window, so someone wanted me to hear it. The thing was, my bedroom isn't facing the front of the house or the road or anything. My room's actually toward the back of the house, so someone would have had to walk to the backyard in order to knock on my window, which seemed very odd, and I had my dad check, but when he opened the curtains, no one was outside the window. He even went in the backyard to check, but no one was there. That was the first incident, and I closed my curtains and brushed it off as just me hearing things or some sort of animal. The following night at almost the exact same time, I heard another 3 knocks on my window. Immediately, I went and got my dad again for him to just see nothing all over again. But this time, I didn't brush it off. I slept in my parents' room on the floor. The next few nights, there was nothing. Until about a week later. I was home alone and it was about 8:30 to 9 p.m. and I was on FaceTime with my friend when I heard another 3 knocks on my window. This time, I was home alone so I couldn't go and get my dad, but I ran into their room and I called them and they told me to call the neighbors to check because they were out of town, and so I did. But the neighbors also saw nothing. The night after that, it was about 1 a.m. I think, and I heard the knocking again. It wasn't 3 times though, it was more, and it woke me out of a dead sleep. I was tempted to just look out the window to see who, but part of me didn't want to know. I went and I got my parents who didn't bother to check at this point because they didn't see anything the last few times. I kept hearing the knocking for the next few nights after, to the point where I ended up just sleeping on the couch. My parents decided to just let me move bedrooms, and so they moved my bedroom into what was the office, and then they switched everything around, so I hopefully wouldn't hear any more things. After moving bedrooms, I didn't hear anything. It was good for maybe 3 nights, but then I heard it again, the same knocking 3 hard times. This time, I looked out the window. I saw what I assumed was a man or a very big-built woman crouching down wearing a gray hoodie and some dark jeans that I can't recall the color. It was dark, maybe gray or black, and I closed the curtains, went and got my parents, told them all about it, and they informed the police. The police really couldn't do anything because we had no solid proof beside my words. They advised that we get a camera facing my bedroom and around that area of the house. So that's what we did. I haven't heard the knocking since, but I do wonder who it was. And nonetheless, it makes a good story to tell. Recently, I went into a local grocery store at around 5 p.m. with my 2-year-old child. I was carrying my child since I was just going in quickly to grab some frozen chicken. As I was walking in, I noticed an older middle-aged woman pushing a grocery cart out the door as I was coming in. There was what I assumed a teenager in the grocery cart who was wearing a hoodie and had his head down. There was another young adult or older teenager walking beside the woman. The store was fairly busy during that time, but I'm naturally a pretty observant person, and it really paid off in this circumstance. As I was going into the first freezer section, I looked at the end of the aisle, and I noticed the older teenager who had been walking with the lady pushing the cart. He was looking at me, and I thought, well, that's weird. I just walked past them as they were leaving. Why is he back inside? What I was looking for wasn't in the aisle that I was in, so I went 2 aisles down, and there again was the older teenager standing at the end of that aisle. He wasn't shopping, but just standing there looking at me. I made eye contact with the guy, and my gut just knew that something wasn't right. My heart started to beat out of my chest, and I started thinking how I was going to handle the situation. I grabbed what I came into the store for, still carrying my 2-year-old because there was no way that I was putting her down to walk. I go up to the self-checkout, and right at the front was the guy again watching me. I was like, okay, there is no way that I'm leaving the store for him to just follow me to my car. I walked past him to the front desk area to speak to a manager, but it was just the bookkeeper. I told him that someone had been following me, and I turned around, and there in the second checkout lane to the right was the woman and the teenager in the grocery cart, still with his hood on and head down. The guy that had been following me is there with them now, tapping on the guy's shoulder in the grocery cart and literally saying, "We need to go now, we need to go." I was about 6 feet away and I could hear him say it. I point them out directly and say, "He's the one who has been following me." And at that moment, the manager had made his way up to the front, and I repeated what I said to the bookkeeper. The lady and the 2 guys were about ready to be done in the checkout lane. The manager says, "I've actually been watching them for the last hour because I felt like they were up to no good." And he ended up walking me out to my car. I called the cops just to make them aware. The cop seemed like he took me seriously and asked what I thought those people's intentions were. I said, "Naturally, I thought they would try and take my baby if I had gone to my car." I'm not a big person. I'm on the shorter side, so I know that I would have had to put up one heck of a fight if they had tried anything. But to hell, if they had, I would have given them a fight for their life if they had tried to take my baby. But the whole thing had me shook for days. I thought that I would vent and share my story and hopefully bring some awareness to these sort of situations. And here's the riddle for this video. Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared because your fear feeds me.